Peace and blessings, and welcome back. We're going to be talking about the solution to reparations. This is the second part of a two-part series. Go back and listen to part one. Where do we see the scenario of reparations in nature and creation, and what solutions does Mother Nature have for this? Okay, we're all messed up when it comes to race in America. We're all messed up when it comes to reparations. So why not just go back and look at Mother Nature and see what happened with those scenarios? We talked about the scenario of the group of sheep, unsupervised, at night, that went out and began to devour the vineyards and the crops that did not belong to them. Okay, that is the scenario. Now you've created an issue where the gardener does not have a crop anymore. He doesn't have his vineyard anymore, right? And the sheep owner, they got a bunch of fat sheep now, right? A bunch of fat sheep. The gardener's complaining, yo, what are you going to do about this? Okay. That's really the story. That in that story, this is a historical story actually that has been examined in many scenarios. We haven't looked at it from the perspective of being in America and what reparations should mean when we take our feelings out of it and look at it rationally. So, now that we have that understanding, in order to really look at the solutions, we have to become very specific in identifying the characters, who the shepherd is, who the sheep are, who the gardener would be, and those who are in the garden. We talked a little bit about that in part one, but now we got to get super specific, right? The one who regulate the land or the material world and their followers, the shepherd and the sheep, and those responsible for protecting what grows, develops, and is reproduced, the gardener, and their followers. Those are the two groups, right? So let's go for it. Okay, so one type of shepherd is those of us who have balance in both the material life and social or spiritual life, and can regulate the society without losing the balance. An example of this would be business owner, right? Who has, is successful, right? And has kept their morality, their sensitivity, okay? This is the best that we can do as human beings, right? Reach our peak without becoming, what's the word for arrogant? We keep our humble nature and we can remain sensitive even though we've reached our peak, right? So anyone that has acquired a position that gives them the power to regulate people and has kept their moral nature. So their humbleness, kindness, you could say sensitivity to the human spirit, right? So where do we see it today? I mean, when you start thinking about that, it's no long list that pops up in your head of people that have reached their peak and have kept their humble, kind nature and that are out here working to benefit humanity. Okay, maybe we can go into history and accumulate a list, but when I ask you that and you start naming people, you got to think about it. You do. You have to. You got to think about it. So what comes to mind immediately for me is celebrities, and presidents and employers that we've had, and what our experiences have been, and even closer to home, your parents, right? These are people in leadership. How did they keep the balance spiritually and materially, and how did it affect you? I mean, they regulate. They have a following. The following is their children, right? But we forget this high position of leadership and what it really takes and what we're supposed to be like when we get there, right? So how many of us have let our material life take over our spiritual life, right? Or let our spiritual life take over our material life, meaning we lead with emotion instead of rationality, okay? So really all you have to do is ask yourself how much time you spend on each one, and you should have the answer if you don't. And typically if you ask if you ask us which one is more important, we would tell you it's the spiritual life, regardless of what our actions are. They could be totally opposite of what we just said. But we can tell you we would tell you that it's more important. But if something has happened to us where we can't make our actions and our words cohesive, okay, something has happened to the human spirit, the human being, right? But look at how many of us are willing to sacrifice our own personal growth and development for the material world. It's like laying your head on a slab of stone and willingly agreeing to participate. So, we feel like we don't have what it takes to regulate the material life. So if you can't beat them, join them. So instead of rationalizing my situation and circumstance, I'm just gonna put myself in your hands since you're the boss, and hope for the best. And if you mistreat me, I'm gonna cry and complain, and I'm gonna go away and find another slab to put my neck on, all led by my emotions. Right? This is really a serious dynamic and a serious issue that we're dealing with. The test for those of us who are in business or in this high position to regulate society is that, will we kill those people who come to us in this condition? This is metaphorically speaking. Will we hire them and use them for our own benefit and let them go, when we're done with them? And only truly invest in people that are just like us, the rational, authoritative people that are able to regulate, because that's our nature, right? So metaphorically speaking, do you kill that person or do you work with them? Do you help them become established, meaning, make a sacrifice for them, and not of them, right? So go back and listen to, I have a video on sacrifice. You should please go back and listen to that, because that was actually a really awesome conversation. But if you've been listening to these metaphors and you're still and are still able to really think for yourself, you put together that to sacrifice a sheep when you are a shepherd, right, is to give up something of what you love to help someone else. So as business owners and leadership, this is what we need to do. This is what we should be doing. Okay, this is actually how we're supposed to be in our best human upright nature. But how often do you see it, right? And this is what's causing some of the problems with reparations. All right, so stick with me because it's all going to tie in. But this is the industrial man versus the spiritual man. And today it's being blanketed by racism, when really consumerism is the nucleus of the issue. Okay, so eventually, with the way that we're doing things now, we're going to become regretful. We should expect to come to a place where, we've lost so much of our human etiquette that we face some serious consequences. And when that happens, we're going to be forced to reconcile. We're going to be forced to pay reparations to the soul, whatever it may be. And I think we're going to wish that we would have given the spiritual man their just due, helped them out, helping people out that are like this. Okay, but what we're doing right now is not acceptable. You can't take your business with you, right? You can't take your material gains with you, but you'll take your spiritual gains. You'll be able to take what you gained spiritually when you pass and you go into the next life. But think about it for yourself. Sit and think about whether you've killed the growth and development of either yourself or your child or even your community. How have we contributed as individuals? Or we like some of these celebrities, who push materialism and over morals. You're pushing materialism over morals and ethics, all in worship of the industrial world. Again, the industrial man versus the spiritual man. That is what reparations is all about. We can keep calling it racism and white man and black this, that. No. The nucleus of it has to do with materialism. We are in a capitalistic society, and all of these words that we're using are mask words. They're masking what's really going on. I'm not saying that there aren't racists. Okay, I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but you got to look at the whole picture when you start talking about reparations, people giving up something or people having to do something. So, are we strong in our rational or scientific thinking and humble enough to do the right thing and not be a sellout? I'm talking to those of us that are in authoritative positions, because a lot of reparations is going to have to do with being humble. Okay. So, honestly, this is my personal opinion. I just think the objective is really, that we're burying ourselves with materialism so that our true circumstance doesn't show up. The ugliness of what has happened to the human spirit doesn't show up because there's so much going on with the consumption and material world that it just masks what's happening. Right? And this is why we don't see it. Okay, this is why some of us don't even believe it and we think everything's fine. Oh no, she's just talking, she's always bringing up that stuff, that human nature stuff. Why can't you just calm down and, live life like everyone else? You don't have to think so much and you don't have to, be worried about this stuff so much, my God. But really, is it racism? The big overall problem we're talking about fixing, things and having reparations, or is it consumerism? And if we focused on consumerism, would we see results? Because God knows how long we've been focusing on racism, and God knows how many results we've seen as a result of that. But I'm telling you, I think focusing in on consumerism is the key to solving a lot of the problems we have with racism. Okay, so what is the solution and what are we going to do? That's what we're supposed to be talking about today. So as I mentioned, there's an exact example of this scenario in nature. The sheep who venture off unattended, meaning without a shepherd, and end up devouring someone else's garden. The consumer who consumes where they don't belong, unauthorized, and devouring the chance for growth and development, as we put it. So the one in charge of growth and development, the gardener, will need reparations. However, how do you give reparations to someone responsible for the growth and development of a garden like this? A place where seeds are planted, water is needed, conditions have to be right. What is reparations? So when you think about what the problem is, if we're going to talk about race, if we're going to talk about African Americans, you're talking about reparations when it comes to growth and development in order that we can establish for ourselves, right? You have to be talking about that. You have to be talking about that. And if you're talking about that, then you're going to have to face the question, why haven't we been able to do it for ourselves, even without someone helping us to do it, right? You have to be asking that question, right? If you're being real, if you're being serious, right? So first things first, as we said, we're using metaphors here so that you can grasp the picture, right? As we said, the gardener was misplaced because his garden was devoured, right? So if you want to look at from a race standpoint, the community, the society was devoured, consumed, right? And the ones that were supposed to be protecting it were therefore displaced. What do you do when you don't have anything to protect? So if the gardener was displaced, the question is going to be, what is he doing instead of protecting the social life? What is he doing now? Who is this person and what is he doing? This means laying the groundwork to establish and protect family and community life. Today, those of us responsible for protecting family and community life have taken on this attitude of, if you can't beat them, join them. In other words, you got to stay with me on this. We've taken up this sheep culture, this culture of consumption. So you can't beat them, join them. So instead of focusing in on our problem of growth and development and establishment, we've just joined the sheep nature, which is consumption. Let me just go along with it. Let me just fall in line. I'm just going to do what they're doing, right? So that's really what's happened. So, what happens when the gardener does this? The person that's responsible for that growth and development, you stay out of private matters so that we don't have anything interfering with making money. What's a private matter? These are the issues happening in your very own house, the issues happening with drug abuse, issues happening with your relationship and why everybody's unhappy and you can't get along and stay married. These private matters, the issues why you're not saving any money or leaving any inheritance or establishing any business and blah, 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 blah. These are the private matters. And when you join, just join them because you don't want to focus in on your own stuff. Then That's that business mindset of, all right, I'm not going to get into your private affairs because I got to keep this money going. You can't have that mindset, okay? You can't have that mindset if your objective is growth and development and you're going to complain about being established and what they are doing to keep you from establishment. Can't just join them like that, right? So, in essence, the gardener, or those of us that are supposed to be responsible for protecting the social life and community life so we can see growth and development, have failed. Okay, that's it. And to me, it's ironic that the industrial world has taken over gardening. So it's giving us the industrialized version of food. So I just brought that up because I think it's kind of uncanny that kind of the same thing is happening in society. Growth and development is being replaced with the industrial idea of what it should be, right? When nature clearly tells us what it is. So some examples of gardeners. Gardeners were people like your Martin Luther Kings, your Malcolm X's, and there were several others, but who stood up to unchecked consumption in society. They got out in the dirt and planted seeds, stood up in all kinds of weather to protect the growth and development of what they had planted. Those are the gardeners, okay? That's what we're missing, okay? That's what we're missing. Now, to divert but not divert, here's a question before we get to the conclusion and solution on what we need to do, right? Based on this scenario, based on what Mother Nature has to say. Here's a question for you. Which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? So what do I mean by this? So we always say that, they or someone is putting, let's say drugs in the community, or, making women dress lewd, or breaking up our African American families, or putting, bad television shows and derogatory music onto our youth, But which came first? So we know that these things were initiated, right, and put on us for material gain and consumerism, as we've said. But after so much time has gone by, right, should we say they are still at it, or should we say that today we are now the initiators and they are just supplying demand? It's been a whole switch because, again, you can't point to who the originator is, or they. That's why we say they. Like I said, we're saying they. That doesn't tell us exactly who anyone is. So things have flipped. Are we now the initiators and they are just supplying demand, right? They're just feeding the consumer. All we have to do is stop consuming. And we know that. If we stopped consuming these things that we shouldn't be, then it would just disappear. So, but again, what came first, the chicken or the egg? We have to stop and reconcile with this because the blame game is just gone too far. It's just gone too far. In my opinion, it's supply and demand. So every time we want to complain about something being put in the culture that's devastating, then I think we should ask the question, okay, well, is this what the people want? Because the people are buying it, the people are consuming it, right? I mean, we're never going to get to the bottom of anything if we don't, we just we can't be emotional about it. We really have to stop and I mean, look at it for what it's worth. So what is the solution for reparations? We got to get to this now. We have two groups to look at, okay? And before I go into this last part, of course, there are exceptions, but I need you to look at the overall picture, not just you who's the exception or your friend that you know of that might have overcame something. Okay, the overall picture. People used to call us Negroes, and many of you may know this. I didn't know this, but an elder told me that that's because they thought we could only grow to the knee, which I found super offensive. But when you take your emotions out of it and you look at the overall picture and you ask, okay, where are we in the midst of things? How much have we developed? How close are we to reaching our potential? And I can only speak for African Americans here in the United States of America if we're going to talk about reparations in terms of race. When I look at that, I can see where it comes from. But that's, the problem always is, well, you can't say it. We can say it to each other, but you can't say it, and that points back to that lack of sensitivity that the industrial man has for the non-industrial man. They are insensitive to how their establishments and consumption affects those who are not established. Shouldn't the industrial man who's propped up in the community of the non industrial man be indebted in some way? And if your answer to that question is no, then you have a problem and you're a part of the problem. Especially when the non industrial man continues to maintain these establishments, is the entire reason why they can really exist in many cases, right? That begs the question of reparations. On the flip side, what about the spiritual man, right? The non-industrial man, the emotionally driven man, as we've called it, that's propped up in the community of the industrial man who lacks concern for the condition of the non-industrial man, right? What about that? It's that you're there. You chose to be in that environment, this insensitive workplace that you hate, that you go to. What is your contribution to repairing it, since you're going to be going there and you're not starting your own business or, what have you? This is a part of where reparations are due. Okay, when you're in a situation and you feel that it is not just for whatever reason, this can happen on the industrial man. Like me as a business owner, I experience injustice from people that are not business, that don't think like a business person would think. The non-industrial man, the emotionally driven man, I experience injustice with them, and vice versa. They may feel like, okay, well, you're not being sensitive to to whatever my issue is, right? But we need to look at, again, we're not creating a separate America for non-industrial people. Okay, we're not doing that for spiritually driven, emotionally driven people. So if that's the case, then reparations has to look different for us, right? And honestly, we don't need a condition. The condition we're in right now, we can't live without each other. We need each other because we're lacking what each other has, right? You see how with African Americans, we're always calling out injustice, things that you think the industrial man, whether it's white, Chinese, blah, 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 you would think he would know and understand or just be morally considerate to. We're always calling those injustices out. And then they're always talking about, well, what do I have to take care of you? How much of taking care of you do I have to do? Blah, blah, blah. Well, it's our job in leadership to take care of those who may be less fortunate, and somehow race gets all intertwined into this. This has a lot to do with industrialism and consumerism, establishment, right? Let's just call it what it is. But the issue is that when one side infringes upon the other without guidance and supervision, an imbalance happens. When the industrial man is insensitive to the spiritual and moral etiquette, and the spiritual or emotionality driven man, as we've been calling it, when he's insensitive to doing for self, that's what the industrial man does, do for self, right? When we're insensitive to that as spiritually driven people, there is an imbalance, okay? It works both ways. The PTSD from slavery, it causes us to really not want to think about, anything else. We were hurting, coming from a place of hurt. But again, we're not having a second America. So we have to focus on what we're dealing with and what we have. So what is the solution? What does Mother Nature have to say about it? What would that conversation look like between the shepherd and the gardener, right? If they were really trying to work things out. So in order to fix this, those of us in authoritative positions over people who are not established would have to help them become established so that they could do for self, right? Once they are capable, we would then need to be willing to let them go off on their own without trying to stop them or use them in any way. Once established, we would create a partnership. Once the non-industrial person becomes industrial. You've given them whatever tools they need, whatever money that needed to come along with that, whatever help they are due, right? We would create partnerships, just like countries do in order to maintain industry. There doesn't have to be a bottom class. There doesn't have to be the rich and the poor. We know that because we see how we function with other countries, right? These are partnerships where we can allow, foods and animal and whatever, technology back and forth overseas, so that we can function and live, make money, and have a nice life. But it doesn't have to be putting someone down or someone being on top for us to work. We would also have to dedicate ourselves to encouraging, listening, and paying attention to the spiritual or non-industrial man when he complains in order to become more compassionate about what is causing his inability to do for self. That's what, as a business owner, as a leader, if you are in leadership, that's what you have to do in order to participate in reparations, okay? This would help us to gain moral etiquette that you probably lost because your head got big when you got into your position of authority, okay? This is often disguised as racism, right? It's a lot of times it's disguised as racism or unfair treatment, and it a lot of times you don't even know when you're doing it because it's become second nature to you, okay? You got to check yourself. So here you have both sides giving something toward repairing the society. Again, nobody's creating a separate America, so it's not a one-sided issue, right? Those of us that lack industrial understanding, and we can't do for ourselves, we would have to seek and accept and execute the idea of learning whatever we can from the industrial man and using it to reestablish our garden, right? Our family, our community life, and moral life. Once we do this, we now become the shepherd, and we now have our own sheep. We have our gardeners. We have established gardens to eat from. That's what the outcome would be. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the solution. There's no way to give reparations without acknowledging what I have explained today. That's if we really want reparations. We're super torn. You got all these different kind of mindsets. Everybody wants to do something else. You have to take the emotionality of it out. You have to really be willing to be fair and just for both sides. So now there are some who say that the shepherd should give some of his sheep to the gardener, right? Your sheep ate the vineyard, okay? That would be equivalent to giving the business or money, the business is money, over to the gardener to reestablish himself. That's like the business giving money over to the person to reestablish themselves. That's not a solution. That's not going to work because the non-industrial man lacks the understanding of industrial life. So, of course, there are some of us, that are well equipped to take money. If you gave me money today, I would know exactly what to do with it because I'm a business person, But the average person is not going to know what to do with that. They would need to learn that. So, and remember, the gardener, that person responsible for growth and development, that's the gardener. That's something you got to do for yourself. You certainly can't expect a business person to be the one to teach you how to behave and act, and to establish yourself. But this is why it's so dangerous for those of us who are not able to do for self and establish our families. This is why it's so dangerous for us to lose our morality, because that's not something you're going to go seek outside of yourself. We have to keep that. What is a human being? This is the last thing I'm going to say. What is a human being who cannot establish the material or spiritual life? Right? Yeah, it's bad when you're an industrial man and you don't have moral or spiritual etiquette, and you feel like you're so high that you can't treat people decent, and you can't see when somebody needs something or when you need to be humble. That's pretty horrible. But I would say it's even worse to have nothing. You don't have the industrial mindset. You don't have the moral mindset. You have nothing. So that's like the worst. That's worse than any creation because all other creation has a job. All other creation establishes itself somehow, right? That's even worse than any possible creation that that could be created. Who is that person? Who is the person that does not have an industrial mindset and has terrible morals? That's the person that's a problem. Okay, I'm just saying that is the person that's a problem. And there's more and more people like that coming into the mix. Okay, so I hope you learned something. I hope Mother Nature gave a good solution in terms of reparations. I thought it was brilliant. But subscribe to this channel and you will continue to receive good information from Mother Nature, totally different perspective, totally different way of thinking. And perhaps we can come up with some better solutions for the problems that we have in this society. All right, take care. God bless.